Thank you everybody for joining us today. We appreciate you getting on our webinar. As always, we ask that you mute your lines during the presentation and put your questions into the chat feature, which we will address at the end of the presentation. And with that, and also this is recorded, so at the end you will get a recording in an email, and it will be up on our website as all of ours are, as previous webinars are. With that, I'm going to turn this over to John to kick us off.
Thank you, Hope, and thanks for organizing this. And Melissa, thanks for all your hard work in preparing for today. Today's session's probably going to be longer. There's new guidance that just came out on restaurants in green, a little bit in yellow, so that's going to be taking some time. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions. So we'll cover all of that. So if you have questions about the new guidance that just came out, hold off on those until Melissa gets a chance to go through it. Unless she turns it over to me, one of us will go through it. As always, this session is presented by Dell Technologies. We really appreciate their sponsorship, particularly at a time where cash is tight for everyone. They've stepped forward to help us be able to do these webinars. Secondly, I want to remind you that this session is designed for the benefit of our restaurants, hotels, and travel partners, as well as the suppliers to the restaurant and hotel industry and travel industry. And is off the record and is not designed for press purposes. We're happy to accommodate all press requests, but this session is considered off the record. So if you're a member of the press, please disconnect at this time. And with that, I'll introduce Melissa. All yours, Melissa.
Okay, John, I will be calling on you for the reopening guidance, and then I'll answer the questions for the reopening guidance. So thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to my weekly brain dump. We have a lot today. Like literally, if you remember last week, the P3 hadn't passed. We hadn't had official updated restaurant guidance. We didn't have a resolution passed the House and Senate that nobody knows what it means. We also didn't have outdoor dining expanded. So all of that has happened in what feels like 2 weeks since we last talked, but really it was only one. So we're going to go over everything that I know today. As always, I will tell you what I know, what I think I know, and then what I wish I knew, but nobody knows. So let's start, as we always do with federal. We did get P3 changed, like huge changes that probably should have been inclusive of the P3 all along. They weren't. That's a discussion for another day. But we were able to get unanimous consent in the Senate. The president did sign these P3 changes, and they are going to be a huge assist for those of you that are currently utilizing the P3 loan. And to that end, if you have not yet tapped into the P3 and you're in an eligible business, it might be something to look at, because there was, I'm not sure how much is left, but as of last week, there was over $1 billion left in that fund. So if you have not explored the P3 with these new rules, it's definitely something that you might want to consider. So let's talk about what's included in this. Big part is that the covered period goes from 8 weeks to 24 weeks. So the 8 weeks that you needed to use all of your loan, you can now extend it to 24 weeks. In addition, the change of the 75-25, the headache that made absolutely no sense for our industry because we weren't bringing back all of our employees because we continue to not be at full capacity, was changed to 60-40. That is huge. As part of the use of the loan. Now, the allowances for the loan have not changed. So you still have to keep it 60% for employees, 40% for your rent or mortgage interest or utilities. Those have not changed, but it does obviously move the needle in terms of being able to use more of those funds, not on for employees. Further, it takes away a lot of the restrictions and things that you needed to face in terms of the full-time equivalent and meeting those standards of the full-time equivalent employees. In addition to some wiggle room in terms of when you offer an employee their job and they refuse to come back, you will not be held accountable for that. So a lot of those really strict standards, the needle has moved on those. And I know the question is going to be, how much has the needle moved? What are the new rules? And to that end, that's why the next bullet is Treasury guidance. We are not entirely sure how Treasury is going to be interpreting them, but they will be, and we're already seeing that they're starting to loosen their interpretation on a lot of the usage of the loans. To that end, they announced last night that they were going to make the application for forgiveness that much easier. If you tried to fill out that application, I printed it out. It was 11 pages, of which 8 pages was just explaining what 3 pages of information needed to contain. That will be a more simplified process. Further, there was the headache that we were having before on the 75-25 split, that if you didn't hit that 75-25 on the nose, the entirety of your loan might not be forgiven, and even a portion of your loan might not be forgiven. So this clarifies, and the Treasury will clarify, that if you don't hit the 60-40 perfectly, what you do hit will be forgiven. So that was changed as well. Some other pieces that were included in this legislation is the fact that you can start using that payroll tax deferral. So there were 2 things, an employee retention tax credit and a payroll tax deferral that you could utilize if you did not take advantage of the P3. They are now allowing that payroll tax deferral to be utilized during the time that you do not have the P3. So that was part of all of this as well. And further to the loan ability, the 2-year loan. Now this is where you're gonna have to, I hope you're friends with all your banks, because this is a conversation you're gonna have with your banks. That 2-year requirement for repayment is authorized to be 5 years at that 1% interest rate. Now that's automatic for new loans. So if you draw down on a new loan, if you don't use it, the 60-40 split, that would draw, Eric, stop jumping. That would draw, let me start over because I was staring at the computer. If you get a new loan, it's 5 years. If you don't get the 60-40 full forgiveness split, if you have a loan and you want to go from 2 to 5 years, that is a conversation that you need to have with your bank. Your bank is authorized to give you 5 years to pay back the loan if you don't use it for the 60-40 reasons, but that is going to be up to your bank. So that's a conversation that you're going to want to have if you do not plan to use the entirety of the loan for its intended purposes. So that is, and I'll touch upon this. The biggest part of this as well is that you have to pull down the loan. You have to apply by June 30th. So this isn't something that you can wait until July or August to do. So the June 30th deadline to apply for the loan is still in place. So you only have a few weeks if you haven't applied to apply and draw down on it. Further to that point, for our 501Cs that are not included in the P3, they did not make a change to that end. 501Cs are not included in the P3 drawdown. So that has not changed. There continues to be a push to include 501C6s and all of the other numbers in a future P3 bill, but it was not included in this. This was purely what they were calling technical fixes to the P3 process and making those fixes for those who have already drawn down the loan under the requirement. So that's where we are on P3. As we said, you have a lot more flexibility, and it also pushes back when you need to hit your employment numbers. Just really recognizing what we were saying all along, which was we would have loved to have pulled down the P3 when we were operating at 100% capacity. That would have been a huge help, not a help when we're shut down, or when we're shut down and can only do outdoor dining. So this is really going to help those of you who pulled down the loan to use it in a more creative way. As I mentioned, Treasury guidance, a lot of those nitty-gritty questions that now that this is passed we're asking will be addressed in the Treasury guidance. And we are getting a sense from Treasury that they are not going to be as nitpicky as I think they were before the new P3 law passed. So we will see, I think, some relaxing of some of those guidelines that were in place before. If you drew down a large loan, I think that it was $2 million, they're still going to be auditing you. So if you drew down a large amount of money, they're going to be looking at that. But those who drew down less than $2 million, I think the forgiveness is going to be a lot more streamlined for you. Next steps, and this is to recognize those of you who took what was sage advice, because I was one of the people that gave it, and drew down the loan as soon as it became available in the first round before it was refunded. You are at the end, if not already over your 8-week period of using the loan. And you're probably cursing and saying this is shenanigans because you had to do 80-20 and everybody else doesn't have to now. There is a move on the Hill to potentially allow you to draw down a second lesser loan, maybe 50% of the loan you had before, to give you some of the benefits that those who got the loan later and can really utilize these extra features, give you an opportunity to tap into that. So that's kind of the next technical fix that's being looked at in terms of the P3. So keep an eye out for that. It is something that our national folks, National Restaurant Association, American Hotel and Lodging Association, and the Asian American Hotel Owners Association are all actively looking at to help all of you. That is your P3 update for the moment. And then on other federal legislation, and I've said this before, so for those of you who have a perfect attendance record, I'll say it again, the P3, even these changes aren't going to get you through to the other side of this crisis. So there continues to be conversations on the Hill about what other things our industry will need to help us. The HEROES Act passed the House. It was DOA once it hit the Senate, but we do expect another recovery package of some sort, whether it's inclusive of tax credits for PPE or for retaining employees or making changes to your business like air filtration systems to be more compliant and safe in terms of COVID. All of these are being kind of bandied about as options pertaining to how we can get through on the other side. And business interruption continues to be a part of that. I think that seems to be farther and farther away as the insurance companies continue to speak to that front. But we do expect another recovery package, recognizing that we are not through this yet. We're getting closer. We see the glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel, but we aren't through it yet. And we're going to continue to work at the federal level since they seem to just be printing money to make sure that those funds and that relief gets to you. I think that covers my federal. Let's talk about state. And this is, I feel like I'm going to make some people are going to be like, oh, that makes sense. And other people are going to be screaming at me. So let's see how this goes. Primary election. We have seen some incumbents already lose their reelection, especially in the Southeast. Senator Larry Farnese from Center City, Philadelphia, lost his reelection in the primary to a socialist. And Dallin Leach, also in the Southeast from Montgomery County, lost his reelection. For those of you in Montgomery County, you're probably very familiar as to the reasons why he probably lost his reelection. But those are the two main seats that flipped. We have seen a number of House members flip, especially in Philadelphia. Philadelphia and Allegheny is where we did see some incumbents lose their reelection. Primarily Democrats that lost to more liberal Democrats. That's just the nature of what we're seeing in our cities right now, and that certainly played out in the primary election. So it's going to make for a really interesting general election. As we get through this, for those of you that are not as intrinsically involved in the PRLA day-to-day operations, PRLA does have a political action committee. We have been, those of you that know me, I don't like to spend money on anything. So we had stopped spending any money from our PAC in recognition of the crisis that we're in right now. But we're certainly going to be looking at going into the general election, using some of those funds to support those candidates that just really have gone above and beyond to fight and champion for our industry. So we will be looking at that moving forward. And as we get through the other side of COVID and I run out of things to talk about, these updates will probably become kind of more legislative and politically focused. So you have that to look forward to. Let's talk about this resolution. And please, I will say this, and I shouldn't have to, but please do not believe everything that's written on the internet. And to that point, don't believe everything that some legislators are writing on the internet as it pertains to a resolution that was passed last night by the House and Senate. And I'll give you kind of the good and the bad and the, I don't know, COVID's ugly, so I won't even say ugly. Here's where we are. The House and Senate passed resolutions declaring that the governor has to end his disaster emergency, the emergency declaration. That passed with somewhat bipartisan support in the House and Senate. The House and the Senate claim that, and there's a lot of claims, and this is going to go to the state Supreme Court, and they'll determine what claims are valid or not. They claim that they have the ability to end a disaster declaration. They do not need the governor's signature. All they have to do is pass the legislation and it goes away. The governor's office believes that anything that's passed by the legislature has to be signed by the governor. That's in our state constitution. So he has to approve or disapprove it. In this state, his people have said quite publicly that he would disapprove it. That battle right there is going to go to the Supreme Court. To that end, if the governor says, sure, I'll end the disaster declaration tomorrow or 5 minutes afterwards, he can issue a new disaster declaration. There's nothing stopping him from doing that, and we will just be in this circle of the legislature takes it away, he just reissues it all over again. Also, to that point, a lot of the requirements that you guys have to meet right now are coming from the Secretary of Health. They're not coming directly from the governor. So those don't necessarily change either. So I know that, and then I'll get to the one that you haven't thought about, but I did, because this is just what I do. I constantly stay up at night thinking of these things. But generally nothing's going to change, and it's certainly not going to change right now, because the way, if it even works the way the House and Senate want, they can't pull back his declaration until next Saturday. So nothing's happening right now. Nothing has changed right now. Please do not change what you're doing right now, because as of right now, the disaster declaration is still in place. Now, let's say this gets fast tracked to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, disaster declaration has to go away. Can't have it anymore. Everything that you have right now, cocktails to go, expanded license premise for outdoor dining, they go away as soon as that emergency declaration goes away. So while it might sound great to be able to go back to complete normal, operate 100% capacity without social distancing, I don't know if consumers are going to go back to that quickly. So we really, there's a lot more to this tale than I think that's being told. And I think a lot of it is just, people are they're frustrated with the governor. I think that some of the things that have been handled, people have been frustrated with, and they can't be blamed, but things are not going to change soon. And if they do change down the line, it might have worse repercussions for some of you in our industry than you might be thinking about right now. So long story, short answer is nothing has changed. Red, yellow, green is still in place. Yellow guidelines are still in place. Red, green guidelines are still in place. Please do not usurp them and go back to normal operations, because we are not there yet. And if you do, we're going to be back to where we were in terms of licenses being pulled or threatened and everything in between. So that is probably the reason many of you joined the webinar today, is because you wanted to know the answer to that. And of course, we're going to keep you in the loop on all of this, but even if the House and Senate, that vote stands, he can reissue another one immediately. So nothing, I would not change your operations in any way in response to this. Let's talk a little bit, I'm just full of good news today. Let's talk about the salary threshold. This is also for those of you who might not have had the joy of being as involved in PRLA before this crisis happened. We're happy to have you involved now. Salary threshold is something that has been bandied about in Pennsylvania. I think it was 2016, 17 when the governor first issued this. We were working on, essentially the governor is increasing Pennsylvania's salary threshold. So all of you hit about 35,000-ish under the federal increase that began on January 1 of 2020. So all of you have to meet that salary threshold for your exempt employees. Pennsylvania's governor has the ability to go above and beyond that. He issued a resolution that would increase Pennsylvania's salary threshold. The Independent Regulatory Review Commission approved that resolution. We were working on what many of you had heard was a minimum wage deal with the governor to kind of preserve tipped wage, keep a moderate minimum wage, get rid of the overtime resolution, and then COVID happened and everything fell to the wayside. So the House and Senate did pass a dissenting resolution saying that they do not agree with the increase, and I'll tell you what it is in a second. The governor has vetoed those dissenting resolutions. So as of right now, on June 10th of 2020, on January 1 of 2021, your new salary threshold for Pennsylvania for your salaried exempt employees is going to be $40,500, January 1, 2021. January 1, 2022, your new salary threshold will be $45,500 for your exempt salaried employees. It will then increase every 3 years after that. That is the lay of the land right now. Could, in Sunny Day, another deal be cut as it pertains to this? Could the governor decide that maybe an increase in the salary threshold isn't the greatest idea when most of the entire economy has been devastated? All of those could happen, but they have not happened yet. So please, that's something you're going to need to plan for if you're not there yet. January 1, 2020, that $40,500 is going to be your new baseline for your salaried exempt employees. Some other legislative things that are happening. Senate Bill 1125, Senator Martin. This is similar to a delay that occurred for county property taxes. They wanted to reiterate that school districts can delay property taxes as well and push those back. So that legislation will be passed in the Senate today. Then it will go to the House unless it's part of a larger package. But that will allow school districts, again, it is not forcing them, it's authorizing them to delay school property taxes in addition to waiving any late fees if you pay those taxes late. So that legislation is currently moving right now. And the legislation that you have all been waiting and hoping and yearning for, Senate Bill 1194, has been filed. It's sponsored, and there's a few of them floating out there. This is one that there's been a little bit more of communication and support between the Senate, sponsored by Senator Stefano. That's that liability protection that we are going to so desperately need, if not immediately, in the very near future. And that legislation, if you don't read legislation, you could read this. And the simplicity is kind of what I love about it, also because I don't like to read a ton of legislation if I don't have to. It really just says, if you, the business, are meeting the requirements of business operations from the governor, restaurant guidance, all of that, then if somebody files and says that they have gotten COVID from your business, you would be protected from that. You would be held harmless. If you ignore all of those things, if you decide that the resolution passed by the House and Senate last night is how your new way of life and you're not going to follow any of those guidelines, this legislation will not protect you. But this will be that liability protection that you all have been looking for. We are going to be doing a grassroots push on this. If it's not streamlined to move immediately, this is going to become our top priority, recognizing that all of you on this call are going to need that protection. So please stay tuned, not only the weekly webinars and the daily updates, but any grassroots messaging that we send out as well, because this is just something that we are going to desperately need. And while the feds can certainly do something, we're going to need that state protection as well. So that is an overview of everything happening on the state. Okay, I'll quickly go through this because I know we're going to spend a lot of time on the reopening piece. In Philadelphia, we do have legislation that's being considered tomorrow in City Council that would start regulating third-party delivery companies, that would require them to, one, have an agreement with you to list your restaurant and provide food from your restaurant. And if they don't, they need to put a disclaimer saying that they don't have that agreement with you. So for all of those customers who call and yell at you and say they waited 2 hours for their food and that wasn't on you, they will have to have a disclaimer stating that they don't have an agreement with your restaurant. Two, transparency in fees is part of that legislation. So if they are going to charge 20, 30, 40% or charge a delivery fee and a processing fee and a listing on the website fee and a credit card fee, all of that would have to be delineated to the consumer. And then third, which would only be for the length of the crisis, we are looking at putting a cap on those fees. It looks like it'll be between 10 and 15% that they could charge over the course of the crisis, recognizing that delivery is your livelihood for a lot of you right now. It's really what's getting you over the hump, and recognizing that maybe not everybody appreciates that, and you're paying a lot more in fees than you probably need to. So that legislation is going to be moving. hopefully out of committee tomorrow, and PRLA and some of our members, I'm not sure if any are on the call today, will be testifying at that hearing. Second, I don't know how many of my Allegheny County people, not Pittsburgh, Allegheny County, paid sick leave, it's coming. They're going to move it out of committee possibly as early as next week. And it is verbatim the same as Pittsburgh's paid sick leave. So all of those standards will apply and would apply to every business in Allegheny County. We will be reaching out to all of you if you want to engage on this front. We're going to be looking at pushing back at minimum the effective date. It's a 90-day effective date. I don't think any of you can meet the standards of this legislation in 90 days. But this is something that they have the votes for. So we're really going to need active engagement from members out there if this is a concern, because it's not something that my wit and wisdom and brilliance is going to stop. So we're really going to need engagement from all of you. It's hard to fight when you have a deadly virus circulating throughout the community, and we need to recognize that. But we also need elected officials to recognize that our industry is just decimated, and another mandate is probably not the best thing to do in the middle of this crisis. So we will need all of your help on that front in terms of communicating that with Allegheny County, recognizing that what starts in one municipality can spread to another. So please keep an eye out, as always, to our daily updates and my weekly webinars if we see some of these things continuing to pop up. Let's get, no wedding questions. We have answers for weddings. Don't ask any more wedding questions until we give you the answers. That's my plea for today. I think I have like 6 emails for weddings already, and I know it's the big question for today. Let's talk about Philadelphia, and then we're going to drill down a little bit more, and I'm going to turn it over to John. Philadelphia, it is anticipated that on Friday, it's not anticipated, you will, if you have already approved outdoor dining space in Philadelphia, you will be able to start offering outdoor dining beginning on Friday. In conversations with the city, we believe that an application will be available beginning next week for extension of premise onto city property, going down the sidewalk further, using parklets, using existing space near your establishment, that those applications will begin to be available next week, with you being able to start doing that by next Friday. It's Philadelphia, everything can change, but that is where we are in terms of that. Outdoor dining in yellow, I'm gonna turn it over to John, because literally less than 1 hour ago, they did update the guidance for restaurants, specifically addressing private events, catering events, and everything in between. So hold your questions on anything related to reopening until John is done going over all of the changes, and then we'll do a deep dive into any specific questions relating to the new changes. And John, you can take it away.
But thanks, Melissa. Appreciate that. Let me first say that we've had a number of comments from around the state, from restaurants that are on the green phase, either saying they're surprised at how well they're able to do at 50% capacity. In fact, we just talked with an operator who says he's comping over last year. We've heard that from a couple of other people as well. Some ingenuity and creativity is necessary. Would we like to be at 75 or 100%? I'm sure all of you would, as I would if I was still operating restaurants. But again, we began this when we started the discussion at 25%, and we're able to open in 50%, which very few states did. Texas is just going over 50% next week to go to 75, and we're one of the first states open. Georgia is still at, based on their standards, which is an amount per 100 square feet, they're still at about 50%. So I would encourage you to operate in that, because we may be there for a while. That said, we have mostly good news about updates in the regulations, and those are already out. When we wrote the agenda, we anticipated them. We were in discussions over the last few days. They actually came out just about an hour ago. And we will highlight the significant changes in the update today. They may not have to go through all the changes, or they may be highlighted on this governor's document. I'm not sure about that. So let me run through those real quickly. We made the interpretation early on that the 250 congregating rule for green phase, in other words, you could have up to 250 people congregating, could be cross-referenced with the restaurant rules and allow for catered events. The governor's office didn't disagree with us on this, but they have now spelled it. In addition to restaurants and retail food service operations, they've added private event spaces and wedding venues with food service. So that's a change in the guidance. So they made it specifically, they made that specific. They also added licensed clubs, which I think may also be new too. Going back to that, they go through some more guidance which describes what a private event space is. Licensed clubs, bars, regardless of whether the business operates in a larger facility, such as a hotel, casino, convention center, conference center, or similar large venue. And then it also says that private event and wedding venues which do not offer food are subject to the guidance, but must follow the applicable, or not subject to the guidance, which is the food guidance, but have to follow the larger guidance about 250 people congregating. We announced this earlier, but it wasn't actually in the guidance. It's been added that you can use physical barriers between customers where booths are arranged back to back in lieu of social distancing. So in other words, rather than leaving every other booth empty, you could put a physical barrier in, and then that would suffice so that you could use each booth. It's between the backs of the two booths. We're going to be asked, we've been asked, what are the dimensions of that? We've asked specifically about that. Dimensions are not going to be spelled out. They don't want to be overly prescriptive, but they've said you need to use your common sense and follow the spirit of the law. And the question was, if we assumed that a somewhat tall person was sitting in a booth, and we had the booth barrier at the height of their head, top of their head when they're sitting down, is that common sense? They said that would seem to be fine. Okay, there's also, they have always clarified that maximum occupancy includes all occupants of the facility, including employees. They've spelled that out in this. This is no change, they've just spelled it out. We've taken at least 4 or 5 runs at this, and we haven't been able to get that changed at this point in time. We'll still keep working on it. But again, I would tell you that if you're doing maximum occupancy, you're talking about the space that the occupancy is defined, which is typically going to be the actual dining area. In the case of a banquet room, the banquet room. So if you have back of the house people that are not entering that space while it's being occupied, those wouldn't count. Servers would count. Servers, bartenders, and other front of the house people. A big correction is that for outside dining, there was, it said that because there's typically not a fire code there, that it would be 12 people per 1,000 square feet. And that was a very low number, and frankly, we felt like it was an error. That's been adjusted to 24 people per 1,000 square feet. And again, that's just for outdoor dining, doesn't apply if you have a fire code indoor. If you don't have a fire code for some strange reason, this would apply, 24 per 1,000. You don't need to post the capacity of your outdoor space like it's posted inside already. We've been asked that question too, but that's the number you're supposed to be using. And then of course, social distancing as well. In addition to the maximum occupancy requirements, there's additional limits apply to discrete gatherings or events that may be held within a restaurant facility or venues such as weddings, catered events. Specifically, restaurant facilities and venues must limit total number of individuals gathering at one time, including staff, for any discrete gathering or event within the facility. This is essentially saying that in yellow phase, you can have 25 people in one gathering. In green phase, 250. There was an area that was in the must-do area in the prior regulations. Said you must close or remove amenities and congregate areas non-essential to the preparation and service of food and beverage, such as dance floors, child play areas, interactive games, and video arcades. This has been moved to the encouraged area. So to make a long story short, you can have dance floors now. If you have musicians at a restaurant, facility, or venue, they have to remain at least 6 feet from patrons or staff, but you can have musicians, live musicians or performers. which there was some question about that in the previous regulations. Okay. This is big for breweries. In the past regulation said in yellow that you could not refill food and beverage containers or implements brought in by the customer. And now that's been added, unless the container or implement can be refilled without contact with the tap or dispenser, containers are sanitized before use, or the tap or dispenser is sanitized after each use. So in other words, if you're a brewery, you can refill a growler that a guest brings in. This last one is probably the one negative of all of the changes, and it's something that is in place, and I'll tell you what's happening on it. In addition to the requirements that we've mentioned, all private event spaces and wedding venues with food service authorized to conduct in-person activities pursuant to the guidance are required to maintain a list of all guests in attendance, including the location of origin. You don't need a phone number, you don't need an address, you just need the city that they came from. We think this should be a host responsibility or put in the encouraged phase rather than in the required phase. But we're working on that now, and right now it is required that there is a guest list. That's not uncommon for private events under COVID ordinances, particularly when in our case, we have allowed up to 250 guests. So that's a summary of the changes. I'm sure we'll get some questions along the way. Melissa's probably had a chance to review some of the questions now and may want to go through those. So with that, I'll turn it back to Melissa.
Hey, thanks, John. And I know we are getting some questions, and we'll work through them. But I think John provided a pretty good overview, and I know that has been posted on social media, the updated guidance, and it of course will be in our daily update as well. So definitely keep an eye out for that. Other items, we are still waiting for clarification. I'm not sure if any of my amusement parks or large venues are on the call today. We have been told, not yet in writing, that the 250 number won't necessarily apply to large venues like amusement parks. The 50% rule will apply, but that has not been delineated officially. I think they're still working on the guidance for that. Now, we expect that, but as of right now, it isn't out yet. And as soon as it is, as always, we will get that to you. So we're still waiting for kind of that delineation of where does 250 apply. We now know 100% 250 applies to restaurants and private events and catered events and weddings. But where does the 250 apply otherwise? And we're hoping to get that shortly. The LCB, want to cover a few facets on this piece regarding extension of premise. Many of you applied for that application already. If you paid $220, you clicked on the wrong link. You want to do the emergency extension of premise, so please make sure if you have not applied for that extension that you apply for the emergency extension. That is the one that comes at no charge and is available during the course of the crisis. In addition, while it will in a lot of places just let you click through it, you do need to inform them where you are extending your premise to. So if you are even taking kind of a Google photo or even drawing a sketch, there needs to be some type of upload as it pertains to you're going out into the parking lot, you're going 20 feet down the sidewalk. You do need to have that information available to them. Second to that, and I know Harrisburg has done a really great job of this, if you are shutting down streets or you're extending your premise anywhere within a municipality or municipal property, you will want to include that letter from your municipality authorizing your ability to extend onto municipal property. So that's something you're going to be wanting to work with your local officials on. Since I'm in Harrisburg, Harrisburg went gangbusters last week in terms of shutting down 2nd Street and allowing all of the restaurants to expand into the street. It was really awesome and something to see there. Also for the extension of premise, I want to address this right now. As soon as you fill out the application, you get kind of your application has been submitted. That's your temporary authority. So you can start your outdoor premise dining immediately. You're granted temporary authority. Your official authority, if you did something wrong or you didn't include something, that's going to start coming probably down this week. But as soon as you submit that application, you're granted temporary authority. you need to print out that confirmation page that it's been submitted and post that just like you would your orange placard. But you are allowed to start operating and extending your premise upon submission of that application. If you miss something, like I said, you might get it pulled down the line. So please make sure you check the boxes in terms of the requirements from the LCB. Another item I want to touch upon is it's bureaucracy. That's all. I don't know. That's all I have to say. So the LCB has said that if your license is expired, you do not need to renew your license right now. One, because they're shut down, and two, nobody has $1,500 to renew a liquor license at this point in time. We are working long-term on relieving the cost of that license, if not pushing it back and giving everybody kind of a year off in terms of renewals. But the problem that we're seeing right now is that in some cases, when you're going to PLCB Plus to extend your premise, or sometimes when you go into Loop to place your order, it's telling you you can't because your license is expired. I don't know if it's a one-off. I don't know if it's universal, but I know we've been getting questions. I know the LCB has been getting questions. So if you run into that, please reach out to me. We can have it manually fixed for you. We also run into the problem that we have a member that this happened to yesterday. We got it fixed, and then they updated the system, and then everybody reverted back to what happened before. So they are working through that, but if you are having issues with your expired license and not being able to extend your premise or place your order through Loop, let us know, and we will help get that addressed for you. And I think with that, we're going to go to upcoming webinars, and then we'll take all of the questions. Who's handling webinars?
I will. As always, we have our webinars, upcoming webinars listed on our website and the archived ones. Heartland is going to be doing a great webinar tomorrow at 2 p.m. Check that out. We are going to be having a panel discussion tomorrow at 3:30 with individuals from Ecolab, Cisco, and Red Robin, a Lehigh Valley restaurant group, Red Robin franchisees. Please join us. They're going to be discussing reopening, some best practices, things you should be thinking about, and how they approached the process of getting open and what they've been seeing as places have been opening. So definitely check that out. Next week, Heartland will be presenting for the Pennsylvania Restaurant and Lodging Association about recruiting, onboarding, and work opportunity credits. So as you're bringing people back, helping you, recruiting people and things that you could be thinking about for credits that you could be getting from there. And again, Melissa will be back next week with an industry update. So that is the webinar scheduled for now, but please keep an eye on it. It does change each day with additional outside webinars that we find that we think are useful to you.
Hope, if I may, a part of the 3:30 webinar tomorrow is to help those of you who are concerned that you cannot operate successfully in green with some best practices so that you can operate successfully in green from some operators, in this case, Lehigh Valley Restaurant Group, who have opened several restaurants in green with quite a bit of success. So that would be another reason to get on that one. It's not just about how to reopen, but it's how to reopen and make the most of it. Thanks, Hope.
Mm-hmm. John, did you want to take this, or do you want me to?
Okay, sure. The first one is about the HARP, which is the foundation that we've set up to help employees who are displaced and hospitality employees who are in need, essentially. And this describes some of the events that are taking place right now. And then down below is Carry Out PA, which I think a lot of you are signed up for. We have nearly 2,000 restaurants now on this. Many restaurants are reporting that they've been able to regain as much as 50% of their original pre-COVID revenue in takeout and delivery. Some that had never done it before are now doing 30 or 40%. Certainly not enough to sustain, but a good way to help get through this. So make sure you get on Carry Out PA if you're not already. We've also had questions about operational resources such as face masks, face shields, thermometers, etc. And we've tried to aggregate as many good sources as we can under the that link that's on there too. So with that, Melissa, you want to start with the questions, and if you want me to answer any, let me know.
Okay, let's start sending them in. First question, I know we went through, and I know we have a lot more banquet questions that we will work through. Do bread spreads have to be laundered after each guest's departure? There is not specific guidance for hotels. There's best practices, and I know we have that on our website. I know we have the hotel promise. I know AHLA has a promise. But I think it's honestly something that you just need to think about for the comfort of your guests. If a guest comes in, are they going to feel more comfortable knowing everything in there is fresh and new and sanitized? So there is no requirement, but as we've said, there is the things that you have to do and the things that you might want to do to make your guests feel comfortable. So that there's no requirement, but it just might be something. I know we have a number of hotels that essentially have taken out everything in those hotel rooms that they can, just to make it really easy for them to come in after a guest leaves and clean the space and get it ready for the next guest. I talked about DMOs in the P3. I talked about June 30th. Any updates on opening outdoor and indoor pools for hotels? Outdoor pools for hotels can open in yellow and green. There are guidelines. It's been in a few daily updates. It's on the governor's website. You do need to meet CDC standards. Your lounge chairs and such need to be socially distanced. You need to follow all of those requirements. But they have clarified that outdoor pools are allowed in yellow and green. Indoor pools, and I brought this up on a few webinars, I have asked no less than 10 times, and I think John has asked no less than 5 at least times about indoor pools. It's kind of, every time we ask, they give us this guidance and we say that says outdoor, that doesn't say indoor, that doesn't address the question. Melissa, trying to be the governor, would suggest that since your pools are primarily attached to your fitness centers for indoor, you might want to wait until green to reopen your indoor pool. If we get a different answer, we will tell you, but the lack of an answer, I think, kind of speaks to the fact that they're not going to look fondly upon it in yellow. John, do you have anything to add there?
I think that's really well said. I think it's going to fall under the fitness center guidelines, which is going to be, what, at 50%, I believe.
Yeah.
And again, they give us the exact same answer. They give us the guidance on outdoor pools when we ask for the guidance on indoor pools.
Have localities deferred their property tax collection? Some have and some haven't. You would want to check with your counties. I can't keep track of 67 counties, but we have seen some of them have not delayed the early pay fee. So the early pay you had to pay, I think, by April 20th. A lot of them didn't do that, but they did push back the full payment. And it depends on your county. Again, similar to school taxes, the state is authorizing school districts and counties to push back or delay the remittance of these taxes. It's up to them if they want to do so. So you want to check your county website. I know that those that have done it have put it very prominently on the county website. So I would check there. As approved about 4 weeks ago for P3, and just a couple of days ago, I was also approved for idle. Are there any restrictions, limitations to using both? No, but we're waiting for a little bit more guidance from Treasury on this. You can't use them at the same time. So for the time that you are using your P3, so if you're using it for 24 weeks, you cannot use the idle either during that time or for the same reasons of that time. Now this is a little wishy-washy because initially the understanding was if you pulled down an idle, it was going to be deducted from your P3, and now that has changed a little bit. So Sean, let me get a little bit more clarification on with the new rules if that has changed, because it's been, John, I don't know if you have anything to add there. It started out you couldn't have both, one would be deducted from the other, and then it moved to you can have both, but they can't be used at the same time or for the same things.
Yep. I think you're exactly right. They kind of did a 180 on that and made it more lenient in this case.
Regarding the reopening for business post and flyer, this doesn't seem to really apply to all businesses. Is it a requirement for all businesses to post for their employees? Hold on, I'm going to bring up PA business. Okay, I'm going to read because I don't ever Don't ever take anything for granted. Let me pull up the guidance really quick. So this is what the directive from the governor says as it pertains to those postings. Businesses conducting in-person operations or serving the public are required to make employees and customers aware of the guidance. Businesses must print, sign, and post these procedures on their premises. Businesses must post the signed flyer in an employee common space, and if the business serves the public, the business must also post the flyer near the business's public entrance in prominent locations. They're saying if the public is entering your business, you need to have that posted. So even if it might not make a lot of sense for your specific business, they are saying if the public is entering your establishment for some type of service, to shop, to pick up a brochure, to eat, to drink or sleep, you need to have that posted. Can we leverage our position with the declaration legislation to get yellow and green restrictions reduced? Operating at 50% capacity is a significant issue, and there is no date when it will increase. We are being locked into limited operations indefinitely. Social distancing is not going away between tables. So we could fight like the Dickens to get to 75%, and they're still going to say you need to socially distance. So I still am not sure until social distancing goes away if fighting to get to 75 or 100% capacity is going to help anybody when they're still going to be requiring social distancing between tables. But I will say the Secretary of Health has said that she does not want this to be a forever situation, that they want to continue moving the needle forward, that they would like to see us bump up to 75. And keep in mind, once we hit 75, cocktails to go is gone. So some of those, I don't want to call them crutches, but some of those helps we have right now, you want to make sure that your guests are comfortable coming back and filling up your entire restaurant again, because everything that you have now to help you get through it are going to go away. So I just think that's something we want to be careful about. And John, I don't know if your discussions with the governor's office have gone down this path or not.
Well, I would first say, Dave, that leveraging the declaration is not going to make any difference because the governor has said and will continue to maintain to the bitter end that he has the unilateral authority to manage a declaration of emergency. So that wouldn't, I will say to Melissa's point, I talked to some of my operator friends in Texas who are now looking at going to 75%. They said it'll make no difference because they still have the same social distancing they had at 50%. Some operators, Mick Owens is a good example, set up his restaurant with social distancing exactly per the standards, and not ironically, interestingly, it came out exactly 50% of fire code capacity too. So it's not going to be the case in every restaurant. Every restaurant's different, I understand. So I was actually heartened by the fact that the secretary commented at the press conference on Friday that we do have to be looking towards the next phase. Well, that's the golden phase or whatever, and that they're working on that right now. So I don't know what that looks like, but I think that that's going to be, I mean, I was frankly a bit surprised we didn't open at 25 or 30 like a lot of other states did and got open at 50 and happy with that. But we're always pushing for more and trying to balance the safety with your practicality. So we'll keep working on it, Dave.
Okay, we have a question, and I'll speak to this because some of you might need to reach out to your liquor lawyers. When I followed the link to PLCB's licensing under other license changes, it says you do not have any licenses associated to your account.
John, if I
Okay, I'm going to continue. If you do not have any licenses associated to your account, so really, when your license was approved, you got a code from the LCB to allow you access to PLCB Plus. And as you've renewed your licenses over the years, that's how you have to do it. A lot of licensees have their lawyers that are renewing it for them, and the lawyers have the code, and you've never had any other reason to go into PLCB Plus. So if you have a liquor lawyer or somebody that's been renewing your license, they probably have your account set up for you. Otherwise, you do need to get that code from licensing to link your liquor license to your account. And if you do not get a quick response there, we can assist with that. But more than once when I've said, does your liquor lawyer renew your license? They said yes, and then they can get in because the access is already there. It's just you didn't know that you needed a code to connect your license to your account. So check there, and if you still have an issue after reaching out to licensing, we can work to try and get that access code for you. Bob, yes, we can share the legislation. The delivery fee legislation was, I think it was included in an update last week, but we can share it again in terms of the parameters of that. There will be an amendment to it, at least we expect there to be. So you might want to wait until we get the amendment process figured out so you can see kind of where we land at the end of the day. I think we did touch upon the banquets, and I know we have more banquets, but the general banquet and wedding questions we've addressed. You mentioned Wolf's new guidance announced today at around 10 a.m. Where is that information normally published? Website, press release, etc. It's like a process. To be honest, the easiest way I can pull it up is by Googling PA restaurant guidance, and it pulls up. It's not, DCED has not really been doing a phenomenal job of updating their website with this guidance. I know an email went out earlier this week with the link to that guidance, but really you have to sort back through the governor's press releases to find it. If you go onto the governor's reopen PA, it might be listed there. It is not the easiest document in the world to find, which is why I find it's easier for me to just Google it. And I know Steph included a link to it in this as well. We talked about dance floors. I did answer the dance floor question. Do musicians in restaurant event space have to wear masks and be 6 feet from other musicians? The guidance specifically speaks to musicians, and they need to be 6 feet away from guests. Is there anything else in there, John?
They're assuming that the musicians are essentially a related party, like a related party sitting at a table, so they wouldn't have to be social distanced. And there is a provision in the mask rule that says that if wearing a mask causes you not to be able to do your job, you don't have to wear one. So if, for example, you're a singer in a band, obviously you couldn't wear a mask. I think that your duty, and Melissa said this many times before, your duty is to tell your guests that they're required to wear masks when they're inside your premises, and you're not expected to be the traffic cop or physically remove people or things like that. That's up to you if you want to exceed that.
And I know we have a few mask questions as it relates to weddings as well. And I had a bride call me the other day about this. And John said it, as I'm going to reiterate it to you again. Your job is to inform guests that they should be wearing masks. If it's a sign at the door or you're telling your bride that the people that are coming to the wedding are supposed to be wearing masks when they're not sitting at their table. You are not the enforcer of this. So if they don't do it, and to be honest, I would like to see a bride or groom, unless they have a really great sense of humor, that are going to want to wear masks while they're getting married during the ceremony. This is not... I don't want to say you're all taking it too literally, but you are taking a little bit. Your job is to inform people of their requirements that they should be wearing masks. It is not your job to enforce it if they decide not to. You check the box by posting a sign and informing them of it, not by telling them that they cannot have their wedding if they don't wear masks. So I want to reiterate that because I know we get that a lot.
Hey, Melissa, I've had a number of questions about, well, what about my staff? I'm not sure I want my staff around people not wearing masks. That's an operational decision. You've got to decide that on your own. And unfortunately, if you want the government to tell people that, make them do it, protect your staff, it's probably not going to happen. So you're going to have to make that decision on your own.
Barriers between tables that aren't booths. For example, tables in outdoor parklets and outdoor parking spaces permitted by the town with tall barrier between the actual spaces allocated to different restaurants. If you're using, you cannot use a barrier outside of a booth barrier for the social distancing piece of it. They're only allowing barriers for bar seating in green and booth seating, back-to-back booth specifically, in green. Any other barrier you use that you might want to, like in Harrisburg, if you want to delineate where one restaurant ends and another restaurant begins because you've gone out into the street, that's fine, but that doesn't cover your social distancing piece. That's not a viable use of a barrier in lieu of social distancing. Any info on hotel bars reopening? Hotel bars are the same as restaurant bars, so that you can reopen in green. And when you reopen in green, you need to either have a barrier between guests of separate parties, or you need to have 6 feet of social distancing between guests of separate parties. And as a reminder, you cannot have more than 4 people in a party sitting at the bar in green, but no bar seating whatsoever in yellow. That is not permitted until green.
And we have bar barriers up on the website if you're interested in looking at those.
Yep. We talked about the bride and groom wearing masks. If you have a large venue that offers multiple space that can accommodate 250 at the 50% social distancing space, can you do a 500-person event that is split in separate spaces and spread out? John, do you want to do this one? Because you gave me that answer the other day, which was very well said.
I would say if you're comfortable that you can segregate the 2 groups, and let me give you an example that was given to us. What if we did exactly what you said, and it was a conference, and we wanted to have and we had all social distancing, right number of people, we wanted to simulcast it into the other space. That would probably be fine. What you would be thwarting the intent of the ordinance if you had commingling between the groups. Like if you said, we're going to put you in separate rooms, but you can go back and forth, so don't worry about that. That would really be a group of 500. And then you're not operating under the spirit of the ordinance. And a lot of what we hear a lot in talking with the governor's office is we want people to operate within the spirit of this. And if people are operating within the spirit of what we're trying to get done, we're going to be happy and flexible. And that's a really good thing to know. And also, by the way, one of the reasons why a lot of these more lenient definitions came out this week is they were waiting to see how restaurants operated the first weekend of yellow and the first weekend of many counties in green. And they said, we had great reports about how people were really working hard to operate under the spirit of the order, and consequently we're going to move forward. So that's an important part of it, because right now they hold the cards, as we all know.
Okay, can you clarify the guidelines of providing at least 6 feet between parties at tables? Meaning each person has to be 6 feet apart unless they're part of the same household. Household is not really the word to use here. It's if they're a part of the same party. So if you have 6 people that come in and sit at a table, they come in, they say table for 6, they're going to sit at their table, and that group of 6 people have to be 6 feet apart from any other table. So you have to have 6 feet between tables, not 6 feet between individuals sitting at a table. When doing cocktails for weddings, will you still need to adhere to the 4-group barrier between groups, and/or guests have to go right back to tables? So this is an interesting, and I actually was talking with some authorities, I guess you could say, on this the other day. The bar guidance says that you have to be seated at the bar. So when you think of a wedding and everybody's kind of lining up at the bar to get their drinks, that's not something that's going to be permitted here. Now, for people going up to the bar to get service, if you make sure that they are lined up, let's say there's 2 bartenders and they're lined up one at a time, 6 feet apart, and you're ensuring that social distancing, our understanding is that would be permitted. But you cannot have people lining up at the bars to get drinks at the wedding. So you need to have a socially distanced, separated line in terms of that, if they're not going to be seated, because they want them to be seated. So we're trying to cut down the middle here.
It's going to be similar to what you see in the retail stores you're going in, where you have markings on the floor to say that you have to separate this much between the people in line. So you're obviously going to need additional bars over what you would normally have in order to accommodate that, or serve cocktails at the table, which is what we're talking to one caterer that decided that was the best way to do it, and have the server take orders. I understand that requires additional staffing too. It used to be in catering. So, but those are the ways you can accommodate that and be within the spirit of the order.
Okay, the next week's weekly update, I think Eric usually gets that up either later today or tomorrow. So that should be up shortly, the registration link for next week's webinar. In green, do guests need to be seated to consume F&B or standing receptions permitted? I was just kind of looking through that. I believe standing receptions are going to be permitted.
What I would do in that, Melissa, and you and I have had all these questions, I would prominently post a sign somewhere talking about social distancing.
Yeah.
Just to, again, show that you're trying to operate under the spirit of the order, just like you see in every store you walk into now. I don't think you have to have a sign all over the place, have many signs all over the place, but somewhere where guests can see it, and then expect people to self-police it, and of course stay under the capacity.
When will the unemployment rate count against you / experience for those employees on unemployment? Bhavesh, I need to double check, but I think it's for the duration of the governor's order, actually. So if the emergency declaration goes away, actually the not having to pay fees would also go away. So you'd have to, that would be another issue of if the emergency declaration was eliminated, you would now have to pay charges for all of your people on unemployment. I believe the legislation we passed says that for the duration of it, you do not have to pay charges for your people on unemployment. We are working on legislation that will hopefully extend that for another few months, if not a full year, recognizing that you're probably not going to be back to normal even when the emergency declaration ends.
Yep.
I
could take that one, Melissa. Hey, Dave, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask the question. I think you tried to earlier, but the connection was really bad. That's why that you ended up getting muted again. So I'm ready.
Thanks, John. Can you hear me now? I'm sorry, I'm driving. So that's why
it's better now. Yep, better.
Great, thank you. First of all, I want to really thank you guys for all the work you're doing. I know how difficult this is, and I guess my question is, you know, when you look at what the realtors were able to achieve, they got vetoed, but they just absolutely overwhelmed the governor's office with emails and phone calls and all their legislatures, and then the next day he signed something to give the realtors something. And I understand, you know, like we're just starting to open a few of our restaurants up here. We opened our restaurants in Florida, and I got to tell you, it's a different world in Florida. Much freer. I can show you videos of Atlantic Avenue and our restaurants, and it's dramatically different down there. But we waited on purpose to see how things would go. We're opening 2 restaurants tonight, 1 tomorrow. I guess what my thing is with this emergency declaration is every time the governor's gotten pushed, and he lose some Democrats votes, so he lost 2 senators and 8 to 10, whatever it was, Democrats on the House side. It seems like he compromises a little bit. And I guess I would love to see if the Restaurant Association could send a message to the governor saying, look, you know, these guys are trying to do the right thing, but they're getting really frustrated. And I think we all sort of thought maybe we'd get 25% indoor dining during yellow. We obviously didn't get that. Our biggest concern, I think, that the groups of people I talk to, both in retail and restaurants, is what if he decides to keep renewing this emergency order like he's done with the drug abuse one, and he just keeps doing it and keeps us in this reduced phase of 50% or 75%. So I guess I'm just wondering, is it time for you guys to say, look, we're doing everything we can to make our members happy, but it's really unfair that a Wawa is operating basically with no restrictions at this point. Yeah. They've got a coffee bar going. They've got their touch screens going. Nobody's counting how many people are coming in and out. I've never been near social distance in a Wawa recently, yet we're agreeing to all these restrictions. And I understand it's a difficult thing. You want to keep a good relationship with them, but I would imagine the governor would like the PRLA on his side when he decides what he's going to do next, versus the PRLA saying, hey, we got a lot of members, a lot of business owners that want us to support this repeal, whether that means it goes to the court. And I hear what Melissa's saying, I might lose cocktails. Well, you know what? I would trade cocktails to go to be able to have people in my restaurant in 2 seconds. You know, most of us aren't built for that. So I guess I'm just wondering if you guys can go a little stronger on them and let them know that you represent a huge, massive amount of us, that a lot of us aren't going to survive. Yeah. I've got 2 restaurants right now that I know one's definitely not reopening. I'm considering the other one because of, you know, you can't get the landlords to agree to everything. You can't get terms, and if you're going to operate this way for another year, it's just better to let some stuff go sometimes. So I guess, can you get into that place where you can say, Governor, we've been really good. What can you do now for us? Because this declaration is a pain for him. It's ugly. It's, the whole point of getting it passed was to create the conversation and maybe get some concessions. I'm just wondering if you think that's impossible, I guess.
I don't think it's impossible. And I think, as they've already indicated, because of the fact that we're operating so responsibly, particularly as it relates to the press reports they get from a lot of other states, that I think that we can continue to push for continuing to move forward. What we got out of this was the first phase, at least, with the exception of Yellow Day, for sure. We got a much more lenient opening, if you want to use the term lenient, let's say flexible opening, than most other states did, certainly all Northeast states. And unfortunately, they won't accept a comparison between Florida, Georgia, Texas, or Pennsylvania. They only really look at us as part of the Northeast Coalition, and that's unfortunate. But I agree with you 100%, particularly in how well we are working with them on the current order, that we should continue to push to get it to the next phase. And there's no question that the governor, and we've talked to him about this, wants to do everything he can to try to be as flexible. But his number one concern, and he's absolutely committed to this, like it or not, is that he believes it's his job to save people's lives from COVID-19, and the balance between that and the business and economic reality comes after saving lives. I'm not saying that that's my opinion, Dave, or yours. I'm just saying that that's what we're dealing with. Answer your question, yes, we can continue to use the good performance we're exhibiting and the way that we're working with them to try to help our members understand and follow the orders to get to the next level. And I assure you we'll continue to do that. Thank you.
Okay, I know, Bob, Steph got you the barrier details. Any luck having the penalty and interest removed from the Allegheny County drink tax payments that are past due? Sandy, we're still working on that. We've reached out, and oddly, similar to you, haven't gotten a positive response yet. I will reach out again today and see if we can get some headway on that front. Fairfield County has been in the green for a couple of weeks. All of the bars, restaurants have signs, please no standing, we will wait on your table. There has not been any issues. Things seem to be going very well here, and everyone is just happy to be out again. Thank you, Sue, for that. That's good news. We have been hearing, some really positive things from restaurants that just have been going gangbusters, and we certainly hope that will continue. You may have mentioned this, but do you have a best guess as to when other counties will go green? So that we do have, and there is a dashboard that's doing kind of county counts that if you haven't looked at it, not the most informative, but generally, as long as your counts go down 2 weeks after going yellow, you will be announced to go green after that. So for you, Susan, I know you're in Bucks, pretty sure you're Bucks. You went green on the 5th. You could, as long as your counts continue to go down, be announced on the 19th that you will go green on the 26th. Everybody who went green on June 5th will not, the earliest you will, or went yellow on June 5th, the earliest you will flip to green is going to be June 26th. That's the earliest. Now, if you have a spike in counts, like people go to a party at the shore and come back and spread it all over the county, that might delay your ability to transition. But as long as counts go down, it is a 3-week count from when you go yellow to when you flip officially to green. There's an emphasize how important it is to get some relief from the 250-person cap on large outdoor venues. And we certainly agree and appreciate that. And I know that is kind of John's next step in his conversations with the governor's office.
It's not just next. We've had this conversation several times already. And notwithstanding the things that Dave McGorgan's concerned about that we're working on as well, this has been a very, very high priority for us because we understand there are a huge amount of events that are being held up because of this. So, Julie, I hope that we can move this forward. Thus far, the 250, which they thought was generous for a first phase, and they may be right, is what they're thinking of now, but we're going to continue beating the drum.
Okay, I think that was the last question. And I am officially at 13 missed calls since this webinar started. So it's going to be a day.
Well, thank you, Melissa and John, for taking care of all these questions, and everybody for joining us. We will have this recorded. We'll have this up on our website, and you will get a recording sent. And we will make sure to get up the link for next week's update later today. So everybody have a great day. And with that, we will conclude this webinar.
Thank you.